Good evening and welcome to this week's 2020 Vision, where we have a very special guest waiting in our virtual wings. But just before we get on to talking about other matters, we just give our usual update on the situation in Tower Hamlets and the industrial dispute at Tower Hamlets Council. And we're going to surprise you all, because we're going to say, and you can see it on the East London News website, well done, John Biggs. Exciting news coming out of the Town Hall from Tower Hamlets Unison. John Biggs has responded to Dave Prentice's letter sent some weeks ago and has agreed to have a further meeting with the unions. So all we can say is, come on, John, you can do it. This is some true leadership here. So go and snatch a solution to this dispute from the jaws of delay, and let's get on with running the council. So well done, John, and we hope for good news by next week. Now, it's quite enough of that, and we're now going to go on to welcome our guest, who is Mish Rahman, who joins us from what to those of us in East London we think of as a foreign country. Hi, Mish, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Jenny. How are you?
Oh no, I never ask. I'm never well. I'm always grumpy about that. Mish is in the West Midlands at the moment. Imagine how far away that is. Okay, so Mish, you're joining us because your name has been spoken a great deal in East London in recent weeks, because you're a member of the Labour Party and you're standing to be a member of its national executive. There's elections later on this week. So the question we're going to be putting to you this evening is, can we win with Labour, the people? Are we actually going to win if we return to backing the Labour Party? So let's get to know you a little bit before we go any further. And you say in your statement, Mish, that you were grateful to the Bernie Grant Leadership Programme. So tell us a bit about where you grew up and how you got onto that programme and how you ended up in the Labour Party.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Just a quick segue to what you've just spoke about in Tower Hamlets regarding John Biggs and the positive move today. Has it got anything to do with the leader of our party going on to a trade union congress and actually out calling for rehire and fire to be outlawed? Maybe that's given him a push.
We hope so. We can only hope.
Great. So I'm Mish Rahman, and I was born in Walsall, which is where I live. I've always lived in Walsall. I can't imagine living anywhere else in the world. Walsall's such a lovely place in the West Midlands, in the heart of the Black Country. And I come from a Bangladeshi background, and as a Bangladeshi third generation, because my grandfather came to the UK in the late 50s and moved to Walsall in about 1960. And my father came to the country in 1969, 1970. And I was born here in 1979. So we've got 3 generations of family in Walsall, but never ever in Walsall have the Bangladeshi community ever been represented in any kind of local authority or any kind of political position within Walsall. And that was a bugbear of.
Is that still the situation today? There's no local.
That is still the situation. There's never been any Bangladeshi local representative. Nobody actually even ever stood for the Labour Party until I did a few years ago as a paper candidate in my constituency, where I'm CLP chair. So this was a concern for the local community, because obviously if the community doesn't have a voice of their own, it's difficult to be represented. So I mean, this was one of the major factors why the community went ahead and said maybe you should try and stand for, because my values have always been Labour affiliated. I was a Labour Party member in my youth in 1997 till I left in 2002 in opposition to the Iraq War. I'm an anti-imperialist, I'm an anti-colonialist, and the Iraq War was a step too far for me. And I was in the political wilderness for about a good 12, 13 years until I rejoined in 2014. And after I'd rejoined, many members of the community said you should maybe stand for election. I didn't immediately make any moves. I worked my way through the party as any activist would do. I've always been a community activist, even when I wasn't a political activist. So I campaigned in every local, regional, general election, and then came a time when I grew within my constituency party from a campaign coordinator to the position of chair. And just before that, that's when I thought I'd go for a paper candidate role in my ward. And that's when I stood, and I was the first Bangladeshi person of Bangladeshi origin in Warsaw to stand for the Labour Party.
I can just remember when times were like that in Tower Hamlets, just. I remember he talking about John Biggs being our mayor at the moment. I remember when he was leader of the council in 1994, and a massive debate that was had over, initially, we had a committee system then with committee chairs. So all the chairs of all the committees were white comrades. And the question was whether any of them, why were there no Bangladeshis who were chairing any of the committees? And very slowly it was clear, oh, well, a couple of them can be vice chairs, and then they'll learn the ropes and then they can come forward. Fortunately, we've moved on since those days, but I'm distressed. I think that was after you were born, but probably not that long after. I think you were born in the year that Margaret Thatcher was elected, but I'm sure.
Yes, I'm a Thatcher's child.
Yeah, that's correlation, not causation, I'm sure. So I don't know Walsall at all. I don't even know anybody else from Walsall, so I have no idea what's it like. Is it a big place? Is it a diverse town? I suppose it's a town.
It's a very diverse town. It's a very big place. It's a big town. It's one of the largest towns in the countries. It's a part of the Black Country where obviously a lot of industrial revolution and a lot of the manufacturing took place in. Warsaw's just about 10 miles outside Birmingham, and it is a very diverse place. There's about 5,000 Bangladeshi. The community is strong. There's about 5,000 strong Bangladeshis in there, and there's a lot of Kashmiri, Indian population, especially, and also a lot of. It's a very diverse community right now.
Okay, well, I wish your community had got better internet, but we'll struggle on. But you don't have to, viewer, you don't have to leave me as the only person asking Mish questions. You can phone in 0208 1234507. The number's on the screen. Give us a ring and you can get straight through to Mish. Just if you ring in, make sure your whatever you're listening to us on, your phone or your laptop, that the sound is turned down. Otherwise you'll hear it and you'll hear us, and there's a 4-second delay in us broadcasting. So that can lead to all sorts of problems, as we found out on past. So turn that down. Right, okay, so would you say that if Walsall has this ethnic minority community and has this manufacturing background, what's been the nature of its political representation then? Has it has a Labour MP, or which parties are active and significant there, and which of them are dealing with this question of BAME representation?
Well, Walsall is part of the now newly called Red Wall. Red Wall, as you are aware, is Labour heartland. It is a Labour heartland. There's 3 constituencies in Walsall. There's Walsall South, which has always been Labour, as far as I know. The MP for a long time, since the 70s until about 10 years ago, was a chap called Bruce George. And now our MP in Walsall South is Valerie Vaz. And she's been MP since 2010. She's the shadow leader of the House. Walsall North is the other constituency, and that also had an MP for a long time, for I think about 37 years. The gentleman's name was David Winnick, and unfortunately in 2017 we lost that seat in the now post-Brexit election of 2017. We lost that seat by 2,000 votes to a Tory, and in the election just gone we lost again by 12,000 votes. So that was a safe Labour seat, now turned safe Tory seat. And the other constituency where I'm the chair of is Aldridge Brown Hills, and that is a safe Tory seat. But Walsall is traditionally a Labour town. The diversity within the council is, at the moment, it's a Tory council, and it has been for a long time. Labour have been in power the odd occasion. The Labour group is it's a mixed group. There's a lack of black male and female representation. There's zero Bangladeshi representation. The main ethnic minority comes from the Kashmiri Pakistani community.
That's something. So why is Labour? Let's not say Labour's losing. That Labour's on the back foot in Walsall then, and probably some other places in the West Midlands. I mean, why is that? I mean, there was some indecision over Brexit at some point in the party, and many of us didn't like the Brexit campaign. Did it go down well locally? What was it that made the population turn against Labour, do you think?
Well, I think the decline in the Labour Party has been happening for a long, long time. This is the fourth election we lost in 2019 as a Labour Party, and I think the decline has been gradual since 2005, which was the last time we won an election. The common fault that many people say is that Labour has lost touch with its base, and that the people that criticise Labour are saying that Labour are not representative of the working class anymore. We've lost. We don't listen enough. We don't talk to people, and we instead talk back. So the main concern within these red wall areas is that the loss of trust. The Labour Party has lost a lot of trust within the communities.
I don't know what we've done to get to that position, really. I mean, initially, it looked like when we had Jeremy Corbyn as the leader, that in the Labour Party, we had a new kind of trust breaking out, a trust that somebody was there at the top who would represent ordinary people. As Jeremy himself has said, there's not many political meetings where you catch young people climbing through the toilets windows to try to break in.
I mean, one of the main reasons why the party's lost support is because it's taken certain sections of the community for granted. Amongst them, you could say the young members. You could see how we lost Scotland. We lost because, again, working class communities in Scotland feel that they don't trust Labour anymore. And particularly the BAME community is the community that now Labour seems to be taking for granted. I mean, the problem that I see going forward is the parallel between the red wall seats and Labour's BAME voters, because even if they don't vote for Conservatives, there's a chance that they'll become so apathetic they will not vote at all. And this is something that Labour needs to take hold of, because the working class now is no longer white. The working class is also black and brown as well as white.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I approach in quite the same direction. I agree about Labour can drift off, and certainly in Tower Hamlets. I was just talking earlier today to a Labour councillor who was quite in despair with the composition of the Labour group, and feeling that there were several issues on which it was very difficult to get the point across, because so many of them are young professionals who are not really representative of the wider community. But I always thought Labour sort of began losing it in Scotland because of devolution, and not being prepared to sort of back independence as a logical sort of next step. And it was
the main you're right. Devolution was good, because devolution means the less centralised power, the better. However, the problem, I think, where Labour really lost the trust in Scotland was when for the Labour it's a Better Together campaign, I think it was called, when Labour and the Conservatives together campaigned against independence, and that's when Labour really lost their goodwill, because when they went back for the 2015 elections, those places where Labour used to weigh their votes, those votes didn't carry anymore, and there was reports of good activists being chased down the streets by voters because they didn't trust them anymore.
I think that goes back to the poll tax, though. I mean, it's not just the devolution thing, but I think for years, because the Scots were in the lead in the anti-poll tax campaign, what came across was not just opposition to the poll tax, but the fact that whatever Scotland voted, and you're right, it did have, Scotland was red in those days, 100% red, well, nearly 100% red, but it was the fact that whatever Scotland voted, they couldn't get a parliament that reflected that in Westminster. So that's why, there was a move to have one in in Edinburgh because there was that democratic deficit. And I think I can sort of understand that if many of us feel not totally represented in the little areas where we vote. But if you're a whole nation and you can't get representation, then that must be particularly frustrating and drive people to the nationalist cause. And I think that's still in the popular memory. And Labour's not going to break through that until it offers a socialist alternative that's really different from the nationalists.
The rise of the populism has to be traced back to the global financial crash in 2007. I mean, I think we're at a similar position now when we're in a crisis. We're in one of the biggest crises that we will ever face in our lifetime, probably. And what's happened in 2007 was, instead of it becoming a turning point where things were going to change, the rich consolidated themselves. So instead of we, the public, bailed out the banks, and the rich didn't lose anything, while we paid through years and years of austerity, which was obviously a political choice. And now what we have to do, and why Labour has to win, is because come 2020, when we're facing COVID, we're going to face huge unemployment. We're going to face the NHS again. Come this winter, we'll be under huge pressure. We can't trust this government to be able to fund the NHS properly. We can't trust the government to not sell off the NHS as well, because it is bit by bit the privatisation of the NHS has to stop, and by that the care is struggling. So what we need to do is make sure that this, in 2020, we turn this into positive in a way where we don't go back, and we turn it to a benefit where Labour doesn't consolidate, but actually we can't go back to normal, because normal doesn't exist anymore, and we have to take advantage of this in a post-COVID world as well.
But no, I know we were saying that. We were saying a couple of months ago, oh no, as the lockdown began to ease, we were saying, can't go back to the normal. But everything is going back to normal. Look at, the Prime Minister sort of saying, oh, well, I mean, the lockdown was just a beautiful chance for us to really cut back on air travel. And what are we being told? Please go on holiday overseas to keep the airline industry afloat.
By normal, Jenny, I don't mean everyday normal. By normal, I mean we can't. The Labour manifesto was laughed off as being too generous. Where's all this money come from? But when it really hit the fan recently, all this money did come from somewhere. People were being paid furlough wages, by all means, which they deserve. But then businesses were being bailed out with £10,000 and £25,000 grants. Where did this money come from? And not just that, these businesses were given money. Some businesses were given money which weren't even needed as well. So there's handouts. Rishi Sunak shared the bill with everybody whenever you went to eat at a restaurant. So this money, instead of being invested in the right places, this is the change I'm thinking. Where this money needs to go is it needs to go towards our NHS. It needs to go towards more jobs. It needs to go towards the Green New Deal, where we have a 2030 deadline, but the world is burning. We don't have. I'm not trying to be dramatic, and especially coming from a Bangladeshi background, we know how much the climate is affecting us. The country of Bangladesh continues to disappear every year, inch by inch. The coast is pushing back. So we can't go back to a normal, as in the normal before. We have to consolidate in a way that the communities benefit, and in a way that employment, there's plenty of jobs, there's plenty of unionized jobs where workers are looked after. Housing has to be better, and the standard of healthcare, which has been severely exposed due to COVID, we cannot go back to that. We need a national care service.
And is Keir Starmer going to offer all that? Because I think there's quite a lot of disappointment with his performance so far, that he seems to be sort of on a par with Johnson in the House of Commons, chatty, but no actual real alternatives being projected. What can we actually do to? Is he nervous, or what's the problem? How can we pull him over to some real alternatives?
Whether I agree with it or not, it's a political strategy. I'm sure I can't speak for it myself.
mm,
It's a political strategy. The Tories are making a big mess of themselves as they are. And when
mm,
people are making a big mess of it, normally you let them get on with it. Maybe that's what Keir
mm,
Starmer is doing. But today's TUC Congress speech where he made was probably one of the most positive moves
mm,
in my opinion that he
mm,
made in terms of the commitment towards jobs and being quite firm on calling out the government to make sure that there's more jobs and more better
mm,
unionized jobs, which is
mm,
particularly pleasing as well. Uh,
mm,
this is something that Keir Starmer has committed to today, and
mm.
I'm happy to hear it.
And you were talking, you made a reference earlier to the Green New Deal. Maybe not all of our listeners, our viewers are aware of what that is. Is that a Labour pledge?
Well, Labour have been campaigning for a Green New Deal for quite a few years. In the last manifesto,
Mm,
Labour pledged for a Green New Deal. It was passed in conference in 2019. Labour recognised and put a date for 2030 as a commitment to zero carbon emissions,
mm,
which obviously makes sure that we rapidly phase out all fossil fuels and there's a large scale investment in renewables and a
mm,
just transition to well paid unionized green jobs, which is available
mm,
to all. Because obviously
yeah.
we're currently facing a lack of jobs, and now instead
Mm,
of just sending people back to jobs which are going to pollute the air, we may as
mm,
well take advantage of this and start pushing the Green New Deal into into well-paid unionized green jobs. So the green
mm,
industrial revolution will hopefully expand this public and democratic ownership. And obviously, there's things such as transport,
mm,
developing I mean, you could improve climate transitions in terms of finance as well as capacity, and it makes sure that everybody gets proper
mm,
basic rights towards the provision of services as well.
mm,
Another thing that which is quite controversial currently with what's going on in in the media as well is because of climate injustice. A lot of refugees are being created because of
mm,
the rich countries pollute and the poor countries suffer.
mm,
And
mm.
there are many people being displaced.
Yeah. Yes, and there's somebody wrote a play about that once, didn't they? Um, so if we're looking for Labour to argue for a job creation programme, perhaps, I mean, there's one sort of degree of similarity between East London and the Midlands, which is regeneration through sport, I suppose. And we were promised the Olympics, and that was going to be a fantastic economic and sporting boost for our part of London. Most of us are still looking for it. If any of our viewers have found the Olympic legacy, the rest of us don't know where it is. So can you ring in and let us know, please? 0208 1234 507. But you're facing a similar sort of move in Birmingham because you've got the Commonwealth Games coming. Is it in 2 years' time? How's that
Yes,
going down? Do you feel
in
regenerated?
well, 2022 is when we're hosting the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham.
Mm,
Uh, it hasn't started well. I mean, from my perspective, the board, the board of the Commonwealth Games board, which is hosting the games, announced their members within the board, and there was a huge deficiency
mm,
in BAME representation. I don't think there was. I think there's only one person out of 20 odd who was
mm,
actually from the BAME committee, and the rest of it was all white board, which and that rightly so took a lot of flack because obviously the Commonwealth Games is known as it's where the empire used to be, and not just that in this day and age when we preach and talk about representation, representation should be everywhere in every workplace, in every hierarchy of
mm,
every workplace, and
mm,
in every living situation. So that's a downer for me. But obviously,
mm,
we've learned from Manchester because when Manchester hosted the 2002 Commonwealth
mm,
Games, Manchester actually made a lot out of it by being the host because they really prospered. The turning point in there is, I think it was probably a turning point in Manchester's history because
mm,
they brought back to life some deprived districts and it did regenerate vast parts of the city, which was maybe neglected or closed down before. So in Birmingham, we can't really hope for that as much because the areas that it's actually happening in are heavily residential areas. So obviously, there's going to be benefits. There's going to be more investment into Birmingham. There'll probably be infrastructure is already being improved in terms of trams, and a metro line, which is also part of the green infrastructure within Birmingham. So that's good. There'll be more tourism, and hopefully it will be a platform for maybe future global events in Birmingham. And like you say about the legacy, if there's a legacy which inspires a lot of young people to get involved in sports and stuff, that's good. But there are negatives as well, and the negatives I'm concerned about is how locals will benefit from it, because there's a tendency when these major events happen, they don't include local people, and the local people just remain bystanders, and you get a lot of influx of people from outside of Birmingham or outside of the country who come in, enjoy the games, and go away, whereas the locals don't take part or enjoy it. And obviously, traffic will increase. Uh, with traffic, pollution will increase. The 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 remainder after the games will be also taken back by the community. Hopefully, some businesses will do well, but then obviously the negative impact is there as well. I mean, accommodation will be overinflated, and then the people that are remaining within the towns and within the vicinity of the stadiums will be the ones who either benefit or suffer.
Well, that's what they told us. You know, the people around the in East London will benefit, you know, from all this trade coming in and so forth. But for a start, they shut off a lot of the roads, so there was these traffic corridors going into the Olympic Stadium, which meant that locals couldn't get around as easily at all. And we were actually made to feel quite unwelcome in our own space, because we were encouraged, really, oh, there's going to be so much traffic and so much coming and going from the Olympics. You won't, be able to go anywhere. So why don't you all go on holiday to Paris? That's quite empty, going to be quite empty this fortnight. That's all
Well,
basically the line.
Again, it's a capitalist project, and so when I see from 2012 London the benefits, because I do remember going to the Olympics. I think I went to the Paralympics as well, and I remember going to the Olympic Village and seeing for myself. So what I saw was Stratford was regenerated. You've got a brand new spanking shopping centre, which is there to stay. You've got a stadium which the government gave away to a local football club who picked it up for next to nothing. So they benefited. And then you've got these other sporting venues which are lying empty, because when you drive through Stratford towards central London, you see all these big venues lying empty. The benefit of the Birmingham Games is going to be is that we're not going to be making too many new venues. What we are doing is we're improving the existing venues. So that's an actual positive. So places such as the Alexander Stadium, which is a famous athletics venue as it is, that will get a lot of investment, which will improve it rather than having to build new ones. And I think the swimming games and stuff like that will be held at Birmingham University, I think. So that will also help the university. So in that term, Birmingham are doing quite well. Manchester also ended up with a few stadiums and sporting venues, which actually, again, benefited the local football teams, because Manchester City took over the Commonwealth Stadium, if I remember, and they ended up being the benefactors of that. So rather than that, I think in that way, Birmingham are making a positive move. We're not building for the sake of building.
Yeah. Well, of course, none of us begrudge West Ham getting a brand new stadium, because, of course, that team needs all the help it can get, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I do, because we had to pay for it. The taxpayer paid for it, and they aren't getting much in return. So I do begrudge it.
The Olympic. You mentioned that you saw the Olympic Village, and obviously, it's a great thing. A lot of that went to local housing. Guess how many housing units, hamlets benefited
Well, I know
from?
because I have a relative who lives in the Olympic Village, and I was shocked at the prices that they're paid. It's not affordable housing, and that is also so. Again, the legacy there is misleading. If it was affordable housing, then obviously it would be a benefit. But these people can't afford it. I mean, we're talking high rent value going there.
Well, there was a great song and dance locally, and this is for you to take back to Birmingham, about how we were going to have social housing, a proportion, but it was going to be mixed because we were also having a private rented sector. Wasn't that lovely? And some places that could be bought. And I think it was about 1,400 homes that were made available as social housing, of which Tower Hamlets got 27. That, for all the disruption we got with the A102 being shut, going through the borough and everything, we got 27 housing units amongst the social we had to fight for that.
Well, this is another thing that we're going to suffer as well, because already, I don't know if you heard of, but people in the Midlands know the Perry Bar flyover. The Perry Bar flyover links Birmingham to Walsall, my town. So we just go down the one road over the flyover straight into Birmingham. We're there within 20 minutes. That flyover is being knocked down, and not just that, they're increasing bus service, which is, I don't think it's got to do with the games itself, but it's also similar to it, where they're taking out green sections from the road and installing a super fast bus, which goes from Birmingham to our town. And it's caused a huge ruckus with residents who are unhappy. Once this flyover comes down, it's going to be very difficult for people to get in and out of Birmingham, and the disruption is going to be absolutely huge. And again, in the long run, I don't know what the benefits are going to be in the long run if there's no legacy left behind.
I think it's very difficult at the moment. I think too many councils are just putting in punitive measures to stop drivers from driving, and we're not ready for it yet. I mean, we've known that having good public transport drags people out of private cars. We know that, but it's got to be good public transport first, and then the use of cars will drop after that. And I think we learnt that with Ken Livingstone and the GLC in 1982, 1985, around about that time. And in Tower Hamlets we're suffering, where they're closing large sections of roads to keep some of our leafier streets quiet and give them better air quality, but they're piling them onto these vast east-west through routes, and that's very unpopular. I don't think we're the only council doing that.
The best way to stop people driving cars is to invest in good public transport, improve the connections between links. Just like you've got the underground in London, where you're always 10 minutes away from a train station. If there was something like that in major cities and the outskirts, then people would park up. I have no interest in driving to the city centre, looking for a parking space, paying extortionate amounts to park, and then stuck in traffic on the way back. If I could get a good train, a bus into the train station and a train to the city centre and back out again, then everybody would do that. But what you do need is you need proper investment into public infrastructure, and trains and railways are obviously something that the last Labour Party before the 2019 elections promised heavily to nationalise. It's something that hopefully going forward that Keir Starmer and the manifesto for the next election involves, because unless we get the benefits of what we pay for, we won't be able to invest into public infrastructure.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Well made. I mean, because we know now the money's there, and it should be invested in.
Well, it's our money. If we nationalise the railways, and that means all we're doing is we're investing into our own infrastructure, and we gain the benefits ourselves, and what we're paying in, we get back.
You mentioned a little bit about the diversity behind the Commonwealth Games as well. Again, I'm going to just throw you something to guess at. We've been going for quite a while, East London News, so we've got a little bit of an archive, and we were able to find in it a demonstration which was referred to as the first Black Lives Matter demonstration in East London. Have you any idea when that was?
When was that?
2016. And it really, Rashan Charles was killed in a very similar way to George Floyd. And it's
Yes.
it's seriously a tragedy. I mean, the man, just to recap, the man that probably had some drugs on him, and he was chased by a police officer, and the police officer saw him put something in his mouth. So the police officer thought, well, that's suspicious. I've got to really make sure I get hold of him, and he pinned him to the ground in a shop, chased him into a shop, pinned him to the ground, and knelt on him to keep him still, sat on him to keep him still. And it's harrowing. It's really harrowing, Mish. You see this video from the shop CCTV of this man flailing around. Have you seen it?
I am aware of the case of Russian Charles, and I am aware that George Floyd isn't a one-off American problem.
Yeah.
We have this problem over here in the UK. There are many cases where there have been deaths due to police brutality. I mean, Russian Charles is just one name. Other names roll off my tongue, such as Mark Duggan, Sean Rigg, Ricky Bishop, Sheku Bayo, Kingsley Burrell, Edson DaCosta. There's a lot of black people who are killed as a result of police racism, brutality in the UK. And for me, it's Black Lives Matter isn't a moment. It's a rising up against the various experiences of structural racism and police brutality, which is faced by black people on an everyday basis. And it's got its roots in slavery, in colonialism, in imperialism, and in capitalism. Because, as you know, in Tower Hamlets, I think you had a statue removed of a slave trader. These people, these docks, and all these riches, Robert Clive and the lot of people that were all statues situated all around the country, they benefited from selling human life. They benefited from slavery. That's what earned them their millions and millions of pounds back in those days. And
we were quite grumpy. We were a bit grumpy about the removal of that statue. We were very pleased that it went, but we do have to point out that it did take some local youth to go to decorate it very respectfully. We're probably the only borough where our radical youth decorated the statue of a slave owner in cardboard, which could be removed afterwards, pointing out that he was a slave owner.
But the bottom line, Jenny, is it's structural racism, and structural racism is just that. It's structural. And unless you're willing to address these structures, we're going to achieve very little. And it's an anti-racist society, is the one in which the power rests with the people. So we've got to end this by... Sorry.
The point we were cross about was that the mayor found it very easy to take the statue down, but at the same time, he was sacking a majority black workforce. That was the point that got us. That we wanted to see his practice improve as well as the relatively easy action. Because I mean, you've come up with a lot of names of people who've suffered from police brutality and the like. But we were talking just before we came on air about 1985 and the Brixton riots and that, and of course they were begun with the police shooting Sherry Gross. So, it really, really goes back, and it really saddens me the way that people are sort of jumping on a bandwagon now and say, oh, look, I'm terribly anti-racist. I've got a book about it. And people, will quote you 2 or 3 books that have been written, and that's fine. Don't mind about people writing and reading books. But you just look at them and you say, where have you been? Particularly, from Tower Hamlets, where we had the first British National Party councillor elected. Not the first National Front, but...
Again, to end this racism, you need greater representation of black brothers and sisters in all structures of society. So you need more of them involved in education, in health, in the top hierarchy of workplaces, in politics. The Labour Party needs more black brothers and sisters in politics. There's been a good increase of black female MPs, but in the last election compared to before. But again, we lack black male councillors, we lack black male MPs. And what we have to do as a movement, we've got to make sure, this is why the Bernie Grant Leadership Programme, which I was part of, is one of the things that the party has to continue to actually empower more young people from BAME backgrounds to get involved and for greater representation. Because unless you see more people, more black and brown people in on
mm,
television, in power, in parliament,
mm,
speaking up for people, people won't the it won't click in the mind that it's going to happen. An
mm,
interesting example is during the last leadership election, I backed Rebecca Long Bailey and I voted and campaigned for Rebecca Long Bailey. But my son, who's also a Labour member,
mm,
he didn't think Rebecca Long Bailey looked like a leader. Now,
mm,
obviously, he's only 15 and he's obviously just starting his political journey and thinking. But my question to him is, why doesn't she look like a political leader to you? He couldn't
mm,
answer. But the reason for him it didn't look like a political leader is because he hasn't seen any female political leaders leading the Labour Party. If he saw one or two, then he
mm,
wouldn't have this unconscious bias. So what we
mm,
do need to do is we need to make sure that more black and brown people are standing for leadership positions. And that's exactly why
mm,
I've decided to stand as well. Because I don't want
mm,
somebody to come when I ask why haven't other black and brown people stood, and when I ask
mm,
my comrades in the party, why haven't you taken applications or why haven't you chosen a black or brown candidate? Their answer would be, why haven't they applied? So just so they don't ask me that question,
mm,
that's why I put my application forward and said,
mm,
I'm standing for it. I'll apply for it.
mm,
And that's why I did, because
mm,
we don't want the reasons. And that's why we need people, a greater pool of people to apply.
mm,
And we need to empower them and train them to
mm.
actually get into leadership positions.
Yeah, well, I've got 2 points to make about that. One is I'm quite involved, or have been quite involved in the tenants movement in Tower Hamlets, and I get all
Acorn,
sorts. Yeah,
is it
I get
Acorn
all.
or?
No. In the Tenants and Residents
Oh,
Association across the borough, and also people come up to me and say, "Oh, Jen, we can't get any Bangladeshi people. Just got loads on the estate, but they won't come forward and stand on the committee." And I said, "Well, have you been really welcoming and gone out and spoken to them about the role they could play in the?" Oh, no, we'll give that a try. And then there's a real change after a couple of years of that kind of approach. People coming up and saying, "Jen, we've got a couple of Bangladeshi people elected, but do you know what? They've gone again. They've not." And you have to say, "So, well, when they were elected, did you ever at any point in your meeting say, well, Mr. Rahman or Ms. Begum or whoever it was, what does the Bangladeshi population on the estate think about this? Have you got anything you'd like to say about how did you do anything actually to try to include them in, or did you just make them sit there and listen to what you were saying anyway?" And there's a bit of we haven't made a breakthrough yet, but on the ground, you've got to just take those extra measures, haven't you? It's a long process,
well,
and
it is, and as you are
mm,
right, there was a time when there was a lot of token representation, so
mm,
people were parachuted in because their
mm,
face fits or their box, it ticks that certain box. Those days are gone
mm,
now. There's people within every ethnic minority group,
yeah,
every liberation group, where people are
mm,
very, very capable and
mm,
worthy of leadership on
yes,
different levels, be it in local,
yeah,
regional, national level. And we have to make
yeah,
sure that all these people from different minority groups, they're also
mm,
encouraged to attend, and we've got to give them the
mm,
tools
yeah,
to be able to encourage it. Because I myself am a product of political education. The
mm.
Bernie Grant Leadership Program
Yeah. Well,
was
what is that, Mish?
so basically it's Jeremy Corbyn and Dawn Butler in her role as
Mm,
Shadow Equalities Minister. They recognise there is a need for greater political education for Black and minority ethnic uh, members of the party, and
mm.
they set up this Bernie Grant Leadership Program, which is a similar to the sister training program for the Joe Cox
Oh, yeah.
sisters, so
Mm,
which is for greater women
mm,
representation
mm,
within the party, which has been a great success because
mm,
the Labour Party now has more women MPs than male MPs, and
mm,
just like that, to increase BAME representation, the Bernie Grant Leadership Program started, and I
mm,
think there was hundreds of applicants for the first one, and I was lucky to be one of the first
mm,
50 graduates of the program, and that's when my eyes opened because I was there with another 49 uh, young black and brown comrades
mm,
who were exceptionally talented, every single one of them, and they will all go on to be whatever they want to be, and it just inspired me that look, I can do this just as
mm,
can any other. And then my union Unite. their political school, which I went through as well. It just gave you the confidence to be able to apply and put yourself forward, and that you shouldn't be afraid of anything. There's no barrier if you've got the confidence, and we've got the ability. There's no doubt about that. We just need the confidence to go on, make a move.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I think most Labour Party, well, not most Labour Party, but some Labour Party members would say how important the trade unions are. And I think it's sometimes can be overlooked that the trade unions will offer a lot of training programs for people who want to maybe be stewards or just want to be a bit active in the workplace. And it's a place where people can learn a huge number of skills. So really do think about joining a trade union if you're not a member already, because you can benefit a lot from that.
I'm sure your viewers are very diverse as well, but it's absolutely vital that, especially from BAME communities, people, and especially my Bangladeshi community as well, because hardly many BAME community members join trade unions because they don't know the benefits of them. And also, I don't think the trade unions have been as welcoming, because if I go back to my grandfather's day, a lot of trade unions didn't even want black and brown members. They had to have their own unions. The Indian Workers Association was one of the unions which people of my grandfather's era would join. What they don't recognise, or what unions have to recognise, is that black and brown members, when it comes to collective bargaining and joining together and making change, we've been doing it for hundreds of years. We fought we fought off an empire just wearing a loincloth and holding a stick. We fought off the British Empire through collective force and power. We're experts at it. It's in our genetics. So, and not just that, a lot of our community members work in low-paid, underpaid, underlooked after jobs. And if they were all members of a union and they were mistreated, then they would know how to deal with their employer better. So it's important for people in our community to join trade unions, and it's also important for the trade unions to seek membership of members of the BAME community.
Yes, absolutely, indeed. I mean, we've suffered quite a lot in Tower Hamlets from the National Labour Party sometimes feeling that they knew better than us, and sometimes candidates who've been the choice of the members in Tower Hamlets have been sidelined in interventions from the National Party. We had a long period of time, I think it must have been nearly 2 decades, when the Labour Party members in Tower Hamlets were not allowed to choose their candidates for local government elections. We could choose them for national elections or Europe elections, but not local government. We never did get to the bottom of that, but never mind. Hopefully we're over that now, and there'll be fair and free selections in the future. So there we are. Right, so I think we're beginning to come to the end of our time now. We've got time to take one last question if any viewer out there does want to ask them. But I just want to underline that obviously you're standing for the Labour Party National Executive. I think when's the ballot for that, for our Labour Party members who are listening? When are the votes going out? Is it
so
September?
at the moment nominations are happening in CLP, so there's a lot of nominations going on. We're doing very well. I'm standing on a slate. It's called the Grassroots Voice. It's part of the Centre Left Grassroots Alliance. We're backed by many trade unions and trade unionists, and we're backed by many great socialist MPs such as Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, Ian Lavery, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Afsana Begum, and Richard Burgon, and so on and so on. And we're backed by many organisations on the left, such as Momentum and CLPD, and Red Labour and Don't Leave Organised. And the Grassroots Voice slate and team members are myself, Yasmin Dar, who's also already on the NEC. She's the chair of disputes for the Labour Party, Anne Henderson, who's the chair of equalities on the Labour Party NEC, and we've got Laura Pidcock, who's obviously a former MP in Durham, and we've got Gemma Bolton, and we've got Nadia Jama. We've got a great team of grassroots activists who are all based in the grassroots. Their roots are from the grassroots, and I think we will represent, if elected, the grassroots properly on the NEC, because the NEC is the highest governing body of the Labour Party. It's where most of the decisions are made in terms of election fighting capabilities and disputes, and also selections, how we represent our party. And our members need an input into how the Labour Party goes forward. It's a crucial time. We're still 4 years away from an election, but now is the time when we start putting these wheels into motion. And this National Executive Committee election is very important. I'm very privileged, as we've been talking about, being Bangladeshi. If elected, I would be the first ever Bangladeshi to be elected onto the National Executive Committee, which is again would be an honour and something to be proud of for me and my community as well.
So if you were elected, Mish, would you come and visit us in Tower Hamlets? I mean, assuming that we can actually have in-person meetings.
I've already come a couple of times during the campaign to Tower Hamlets to visit relatives and to visit friends, and I'm happy to come to Tower Hamlets at the drop of a hat anytime. Yeah, so
we shall find a hat. We shall find a hat, Mish, and we will drop it. I think you can be assured of that. Thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about politics in general, and hopefully you'll come back on 2020 at some point and give us your political views on the issues of the day again. Look, we've gone through a whole show and we haven't even mentioned COVID. There's so much more that we could have spoken about, but nonetheless we did what we did. So at this point I'd like to say thank you very much. Mish, I have actually written down a few. We usually do the East London News headlines on the programme as well, and I just want to have a couple of words on that. Tower Hamlets has put something very strange on its website. It says there's been a significant rise in COVID cases in Tower Hamlets, and it's encouraging people to go to Canary Wharf today or on the 18th or 21st of September to have a test if you have any symptoms, after which you have to stay home. So if I were you in Tower Hamlets, I'd probably stay away from Canary Wharf, because a lot of people who've probably got COVID are going to be going there before they go follow the advice to stay home. I don't understand this at all. But apparently that's what's going on. While Newham and Hackney are both talking a great deal about homes. Hackney is promising 600, just agreed, in fact, last week, another 600 new homes in Woodbury Down, which I'm sure Woodbury Down needs. And what I thought was interesting from Newham was a really neat statistic. They calculate that 9,000 council homes were lost under right to buy over the last 20 years. But, and we've said this generally, but to have the figures is really handy. Of the 9,000 homes that were sold under right to buy, 50% of them are now being let out on the private market. So that's what we've been complaining about, losing council homes that are then let out by people rich enough to buy them up and act as new private landlords. So there's a scandal there that we need to dig up at some point. But Newham has promised another 1,000 new homes for social rent by 2022. So we all look forward to that. Good. As I said, thank you very much, Mish, for joining, and we'll let you go now. And I'll sign off as well. Thank you, dear viewer, for watching us this evening. Come back next week where we'll have another topic to tackle, possibly one a little closer than what's going on in Walsall. But thank you for the insight, Mish. Good night, Mish, and good night to our viewers.
Thank you, Jennifer, and it's been a pleasure. It's nice seeing you.
And you.